Hello and welcome back to Deconstructed. I'm your host Sam Animo Mackenzie, and with me, as always, Harry Ramdeuter Richards. So, today, we're going to talk about Heroic, a team we've spoke about before when I very foolishly said that I thought they were going to win the Paris Major. And like in Harry over here, because, you know, he's far smarter than I, he said they weren't going to, and as it's happened since then, they did win spring final, which is a bit Mickey Mouse, but they've slipped up a bit, and blast employee, get it out. They've slipped up a bit, and Harry will bring up the caveat because he is caveat boy. They failed to reach playoffs at Pro League, which, not counting World Final because they had config, is the first time they've missed playoffs in quite a fucking long time. So, Harry, with your caveat in mind, where are you at with Heroic right now?
Well, I think the community's decided their shit now. That seems to be where we're at. There's roster changes getting called for left, right, and centre. That's the vibe. But it was in an ACE interview. cadiaN said, you know, I was ill before Pro League. We basically just didn't practice. We basically just wrote off the event. CSD is coming out soon anyway. He didn't say that, but we all know he's thinking it. No one gives a fuck about this Pro League, and neither does Heroic, clearly. And they've and it's that thing where you could tell in interviews as well, it wasn't just cadiaN basically writing off the event, like TeSeS and some of the pre-production stuff that was on stream, like he came off like they were just here for the vibes basically. And I know that's not what you want to see. Like that's probably something you should question more than the results, is that they wrote off the event. Like you're Heroic, you shouldn't need a good boot camp to qualify out of a Pro League group with like some shitters in it. Like I'm not going to defend them that much, but I do think people are forgetting just how much they wrote off this event. I think this isn't a fair reflection. Pro League's not a fair reflection of their drop-off, but the last few events actually before probably are more concerning to me. Like I think Spring Final was a massive band-aid. I think Gamer Legion low-key ruined this team. I think they've not been the same since then. And Spring Final, we all know what Spring Final is. We all know what tournaments after the Major are like. Like I know Ents have been good despite winning Dallas, but I think low-key it's in spite of winning Dallas. I think Dallas did very little. I think they were going to be good anyway, and that was just how it was. Whereas Heroic Spring Final, I think they definitely benefited from a little bit of a drop in intensity over there.
Yeah, I mean, what they played with Vitality in the final, they played, and
Vitality with dupreeh, I think.
Vitality, who just won a major, had likely already decided they were making a change. Like, that's not a real team at that point, is it? Like, you might get that one last event win, but it still doesn't. It doesn't count because I've decided it doesn't count. But let's talk about one problem that we will heavily agree on, and that's stavn, who's obviously a great player, but maybe only a great player in group stages. Do you want to talk about stavn and stavn's little big game drop off before I have a rant?
Yeah, and he is the player that I think he's probably one of the most overrated players in the scene, just because of how big that drop off is. And you just see it. It lowers Heroic's ceiling, because in practice, in group stages, they could build the team around stavn. Like everyone has the same trade styles. Like jabbi, TeSeS, Shush are all like traded more than they trade. Like they're all kind of lambs thrown to slaughter, like quite often. Like all stats show stavn is a fucking baity boy. He baits a lot more than everyone else. And in the playoffs, his stats just drop off. Like I did it a few months ago. He's like 1.07 in playoffs, and this is your star player, like the best team of the last 2 years, like most consistent team in the last 2 years. He's been in the playoffs, but like he's got the highest sample size. Like it's not like people writing off Donk after one LAN. It's 40 maps of him being much worse in playoffs. Like this is a real thing. And when your star player drops off that much, that means you have to rely on different things. Like that's when you have to talk about jabbi being their X factor, and obviously last few months he hasn't been, and cadiaN having to play heroball because his star player's got 10 kills. Like these things are connected. It doesn't happen in a vacuum that other players play differently. It's hard to rely on stavn, and I know he's second calling, and I know it's like it's still a difficult role to be the trade fragger. It's like, you know, Blame F is really good for being able to put up the numbers he does while baiting. Like this is a thing. Like it's not just stavn being dog shit. There's just too much of a drop off for your star player. I think he limits the ceiling of this heroic team significantly.
Yeah, I mean, it is just unacceptable, right? Like when you look at the other teams that are around them, like, okay, yeah, maybe we've seen some quiet games out of Nerds. I think it was Map 1 of Cologne. Some Pious was non-existent. We're not saying that you can't have these quiet games. You're not saying that sometimes you can't do this. But the fact is for virtually every other team, this doesn't happen consistently. Like, you can't even really say it happens inconsistently. It's like once in a fucking blue moon, you'll have like the stars of these other teams just not show up in the big games, and that is always going to be the limiting factor for heroic, and a point that really just isn't fucking acceptable. Like, you know, we spoke about spring final not really counting, and it doesn't, because what you have to have there is like, oh well, this other team had this going on for heroic to win. It's not like, oh, stavn's actually played how you expect him to. Like, it's not that. And bear in mind, fucking heroic were lucky to be in that final because they very nearly choked to Imperial.
Yeah,
like I'm very sick of stavn, if I'm honest with you, because I really like heroic, and with heroic you have a team that have so many runners-up finishes, so many top 4 finishes, should have so many more events, and they don't. And yeah, you know, like you said, like the thing with cadiaN heroball, like it comes from this to some degree. I'd also be willing to say it doesn't maybe as much as you would, but we'll get to that. You just can't convince me, right, that if they didn't have stavn and they had blameF, that this team wouldn't have won multiple IEMs by now.
Yeah, and that's the exact move. That's like, you're in fucking dream mode thinking of that move, but it'd be such a good fit, wouldn't it? It's just like, he is that reliable star power that heroic don't have. Like, I think criticism of cadiaN is easy to do, but like, because you think about other teams, and it's always the IGL who gets the flag for choking, right? Like, the IGL is always the one getting the flag, and in heroic he doesn't. Like, maybe recently he's got a little bit more flag, but normally it's not cadiaN that gets blamed when they choke. And I think a big part of that is the stavn, because what IGL does do well with star players choking like this, like, it's. And we don't want to overdo it. Like, obviously stavn has some good games, but this is the star player of a very good team, and he's just not hitting the ceiling. Like that Gamer Legion game, like I think that jumped it for me. Like that Mirage game, I've just checked, 0.40 rating, map 3 of the major semi-final.
Outrageous.
This is your star player. This is your star player playing connector on CTE side and never first into any bomb site in his life. KD? 8-19 in a 16-6 loss.
Yeah, that's outrageous.
Like, yes, I'm cherry picking because he had a good Inferno and a good Ancient, and obviously he was the best player on Inferno by a mile, if I remember that map rightly. But he can't crumble in map 3. blameF wouldn't crumble in map 3. I'm not having it. blameF would still put up 25 kills in Mirage, and then it's a different story because in these big moments, and I think we've seen it, like Nico's got criticised for it a lot, and I think a lot of that is role based, and you can see it at Cologne when Nico's on, a little bit of the Stockholm energy. When Nico's on, your team can be 5-0 down, and then Nico will get a 2k, and suddenly the energy is completely different, right? Nico will just put the game on his back and go and charge someone. And I think it's not stavn's fault that he's not Nico, but we need to have the conversation about, can you really be a top 1 team when your star player is like that level below? He's like an A tier, really good player, really smart player, but he's not S tier. And I think blameF is S tier, and I think blameF's the only player other than Device but I think blameF would be a much easier just 1-for-1 swap for stavn, where like obviously Device is a lot of change has to happen around heroic for Device to have come in, like in Dream World. But blameF for stavn, I think they win more trophies. I think they just would have won a lot of the finals they lost. I genuinely think blameF is that much better and has that much higher floor. It's not even like, because stavn's ceiling just isn't really there. Like he's not got that star power. and it is a bit weird to, we spent 5 minutes blaming this team's best player for why they're not good enough, but it is a role thing. Like, I genuinely think if you stick other players in his roles, like, you'd be shocked at how well they do. Like, it's like the luxury of just never going first in a team that is completely designed around having great trading. Like, there's so many free kills if you're a heroic player, even for the other riflers. There's so many free kills because they're so compact. CT side, T side, they're so compact. You're not taking 50-50 duels in it as if in a heroic player. Like, you watch a stavn demo, he knows where everyone he's shooting is. And that's why I think I've never been convinced by him, because he doesn't... Like, it is harsh, but we're talking about a team that needs to be the best in the world to have succeeded. And when you're talking about a team like that, you have to be harsh. You have to be harsh on the star players, and there just isn't a ceiling there. And I think that's, we've said it before, that's a huge reason. It's a huge reason why they're not crossing this boundary. And obviously there's other factors, but it's too often put on the shoulders of other players when this is just our player. The system's built around them.
So let's talk instead then about the player who, for a while, me and you have said probably is the real star. It's not built around him, but in terms of what he was actually doing in the system, jabbi has been instrumental in heroic becoming a more consistent threat, not just a playoff threat. What's happened to him? Because he is not exactly dog shit right now, but he ain't jabbi.
Oh, he's miles off it. He's completely miles off it. He's 1.01 rating last 3 months, big events. Like, this is the guy who got their MVP at spring final. He got the MVP, I think, at full final as well. Like, this is the guy who, in those big matches, he's the one who seems to be turning up. Like, he's the only player, I think, of theirs that when I did that article, he's the only one who didn't have a negative rating, like, differential.
Well, he was
in
also
arena games.
He was also the one who was going to get MVP if they won in Kata, right?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of weakens our narrative a bit. He choked the final. He was.
Well, he did choke the final, but they all did.
He was guaranteed
every single one of them
didn't choke the final, like, guaranteed. Like, it was a very marginal MVP to Hunter over JKS, and like, if jabbi just had a good final and they lost, he would have got the MVP. So like, he's not immune to it either, but he was like, because we talked about Refresh a little bit, and he just couldn't really offer anything. Like, he was a good piece, but he was fine. And jabbi was that X factor. Like, he's got the best aim on the team. Like, you can see that he's got a little bit with that ability to go outside of the system when the system's a little bit sloppy or something. Like, he's the X factor. And when your X factor is playing this badly, like, and it is a proper problem. Like, he's the fucking classic trap on fantasy, because he's like 200k and everyone picks him every week, and he just has negative points because something's happened, and it's that thing where it could be down to anything. Like, there could be a personal thing that we don't know about. There could be a role thing, a system thing. You could have fallen out with cadiaN or something. This is all. It could be down to anything. It can't, because I don't believe that players just get dog shit overnight. Like, I don't think it's a case of people working jabbi out. I think he was so dynamic when he was playing well that there's got to be more to it. Maybe it's a reflection of heroic as a team. Like, cadiaN's moaned about, they don't really play like the old heroic at the moment. They're a lot sloppier, like, system wise, and maybe that's harmed jabbi more than you might think for someone who's a bit of an X factor. But yeah, like, I think the reason they've dropped off isn't stavn. Like, stavn is doing the same as he was doing when they were really good. He's more of a ceiling issue, whereas jabbi's drop off has really impacted their floor. Like, they're losing to teams they would never lose to, and I think when you check the scoreboards of those games, it's a jabbi issue. It's definitely a jabbi issue.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's more that, like, stavn does prevent that ceiling, but jabbi is just right now really dragging their floor down. And we're going to talk about it, so we may as well talk about it now. And that people have been calling, for TeSeS' head, like, dupreeh's available. I'll get the winner in. He'll do this. He'll do that. Bollocks. In my eyes, there's only so much that, like, a winning mentality can do, and I don't think that these heroic players necessarily don't have winning mentalities. I mean, maybe stavn, whatever. Like, we've made that point, but I don't see what TeSeS really does wrong in his roles. Like TeSeS would be the last person. Well, no, there's 3 of them that would be the last person I'd be looking at getting rid of. But right now, like, I'm not saying there's a viable alternative to jabbi. There's a reason why jabbi was the one that Heroic went for out of Copenhagen Flames. Like, I'm not saying you can go and pick someone, but for me, like, if you are looking at improving Heroic, if you are looking at stopping a rot, if that's like the space we're in with Heroic now, it has to be jabbi or stavn, because like if jabbi can't find himself again, what's the point in having him there? He should be in your head far too good to be playing the way he is, but considering the roles he gets, he's playing far too poorly to still be in them. So for me right now is, why is he there?
Yeah, and it's that thing that's a real shame because he is so young and he was built up to be the future star or whatever, like the kind of out of Copenhagen Flames, like where he wasn't a huge star in Copenhagen Flames, but it's kind of spoken about in the scene. Like if you speak to any of the Dust2DK guys or like Danish guys, they will say that jabbi was the one that they thought was going to be able to level up. Like he had the transferable skills and things like that, and it looked for a while like that was the case. But yeah, like I've looked up. So there are 4 like elimination games, like the losses to Monty in Laos Pro League, and then Astralis and Ents in Cologne. He's red rating in all of them. He's like Ents, they lost 16-14 on Mirage in Cologne, and he went 13-25. Ancient against Monty in the decider map, he went 10-21. Like, and obviously stats to tell the full story, and everyone will say that, but when this is a star player, like these stats really do matter. Like your job is to frag, and he's in the rotate spots on CC. Like yeah, T side, he's not really treated like a star. Like yeah, he is the lurker and he's left in clutches, but that means he's on his own a lot. He's making a lot of risky plays that aren't supposed to come off all the time. Like it is a lot harder role than say stavn, but it's a lot nicer than a sure assets like that. That's kind of where he's at. And these performances they're just not good enough. They're just not good enough. And I think he's lucky that there's a real lack of talent in the Danish scene. And this is something we'll come to as a general point of Heroic's ceiling, is that since the Astralis days, and there's not really been a rifler like as good as dupreeh other than blameF. And obviously blameF's tied to Astralis, and then that's just kind of where you're at. Like they don't have, because you cut jabbi, what are you looking at? You're getting like, do you put dupreeh in roles that don't suit him? Do you put like Bro was supposed to be highly rated and he's been pretty dunk shit in Monty. Like there's Altex that I rate quite highly and has been very good online again at Preezy, but didn't look that great on land for Astralis when he played. Like
Xiphon, what happened to him?
Xiphon, like there's a reason no one's picked him up.
True.
Like he's been there for ages. Like even Stare, like Astralis picked up, he's looked kind of mediocre. Like there's not.
It looked quite bad, actually.
There's not a glaring guy. Like it's the reason Astralis have gambled on like Stare and Buzz, and they tried to gamble on Altex. Like there's not a lot out there. There's just not a lot out there firepower-wise. And I think that's why you kind of have to stick with the jabbi blueprint. You have to hope that he can be the next star, because if not him, then who? Like there's no one out there, and that's an issue for stavn as well, because stavn is definitely, for me, like despite what we've said, he's the second best Danish rifler easily. Like he's still a really good player, and he doesn't have flaw problems like jabbi does. And I think Heroic are a much better team when jabbi's their best player, but we've got to be realistic. He's not, at the moment, he's their worst player statistically, easily. He's dragging them down, and it's going to be hard for them to stick rather than twist when this is happening for so long. And it's so easy to scapegoat, make a roster move, but. And there is that element of you need something fresh. You need like a little freshening up. They've had a year with this roster. They've not hit the heights they maybe could have, despite being number one. And you do want a roster move, but honestly, I look at all 5 players and I don't see a good argument for removing any of them. Like,
I think
that's what's so difficult.
Well, it's like the thing with TeSeS, right, and fucking dupreeh, right? I love dupreeh. I will always love dupreeh. But anyone who thinks cutting TeSeS for dupreeh is a good move doesn't watch Counter-Strike. They watched Counter-Strike for a 2-month period where Vitality won 2 tournaments, and then bloody hell, that dupreeh fella's good, and just ignored the previous 18 months when he was, let's face it, quite shit. Like where
Yeah,
he just
but
wasn't. He wasn't deserving of a place on Vitality, where he was actually at some points, even next to Apex, sandbagging the team. And look how good Vitality are at the moment, now that they've gotten someone who is just better in that position. Like,
and this is still a luxury hero cap though.
yeah, like they're not going to improve from getting dupreeh. I get it, they don't have the international squad luxury, but they're not going to improve from getting dupreeh. He's not going to magically turn the team around, because unfortunately he just doesn't have that in him anymore.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I do think he's that kind of sleeping giant, whatever. Like, they could chuck him in a few months before Copenhagen. He could have one last like burst of motivation. Like, I believe he's got it in him to do what he did in Paris again, but that's not a long-term solution. You're heroic. You need a long-term solution. dupreeh would be a short-term solution.
Right, and the point you just said, the only way that would work with Copenhagen, they'd do that bullshit, is if he puts in an MVP performance. And he didn't even win an MVP in their prime. So, a major MVP. So, let's be realistic here. Even as a short term, it wouldn't fix that.
He's not going to choke. That's the one thing. Like, TeSeS and Shush, like, as much as I think you're never going to find better anchors than them, like, they're fucking elite anchors. Like, they do their job, they get the system. It'd be stupid to remove them. But they're kind of chokers too. They have the same, nearly, like, not as bad as stavn, but nearly, like, they're chokers too. And if you kind of chuck a big game player in for TeSeS, like, I could see the argument. I don't think it's completely based on dupreeh at Paris. I think it's based on the kind of myth of experience just being a band-aid to choking. I think it's based on that. And I agree. I think TeSeS
I just think it's fucking nonsense.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it is a bit of a myth. I don't think he's going to come in and fix everything. But I think there's another thing we should talk about, which is the loss of Kasper Straube. Like, that, you can draw a line on that and see the kind of mental fragility coming back, and like them saying things in interviews they'd never used to say, and like a little bit of a loss of togetherness that, I don't know, we're maybe reading too much into it. Like I said, this Pro League, I would very easily just completely write off Pro League. Like, I think we're more talking about the drop-off at Cologne, like the visible drop-off, the stylistic drop-off. It's not really just about where they placed. It's like, when you watch them play, they don't look like heroic anymore. And that's the thing that's concerning to me. They just look like a good tier 1 team. Like, they've kind of lost that edge in the meta that they had, and they need to reinvent themselves. And that's kind of when you get to cadiaN as well. Like, maybe as it's a coaching change, like, none of them have ever mentioned exist once in an interview unprompted. Like, I have no idea what he does. Maybe there's someone in the world that could.
He's quite good.
Yeah, like, he's probably supposed to, like,
celebrate a bit, and he just goes past. He's like, "Hello, guys, you're doing really good."
Like, yeah, he's like the calming presence, but he must do like a lot of tactical stuff, I assume, like with cadiaN one-on-one and stuff. But maybe they could benefit from someone a little bit more hands-on. Like, honestly, like, there's got to be someone. Like, I feel like I keep suggesting fucking Roband for like every single team in the world, but fuck it, why not? Like, just need someone with a. I think what Exist is supposed to do is be the emotional calmness in relation to cadiaN not being calm, right? He's supposed to be the one that can calm them down in the big moments. And I think he must not be doing it well enough. I think Roband would be really good at being a foil to cadiaN without stepping on cadiaN's toes strategically like someone else might. Because cadiaN's not the IGL who can work with. Like, maybe he is, I don't know, but I think he needs to be the one with the big shoes, you know?
Yeah, no. I mean, yeah, I can see it, because the thing is, right, is I get that Exist is meant to be that, like,
he doesn't even speak Danish, by the way. They speak English when they speak to it.
Fantastic. It says a lot, doesn't it? Yeah, like, I get Exist is meant to be the calmness, but I think when you've got someone as energetic as cadiaN, there is a degree of calmness that won't work. And, you know, maybe I'm with you. Maybe Robban could provide the calmness while also matching cadiaN in a way that Exist never could. And look. We've tried to get MSL on teams for the past 2 years. It's not worked. It ain't gonna work. He's still saying he's a player. So
yeah, he would not let cadiaN run the shit.
Let's let him ball.
He wouldn't be good.
Let him cook.
He wouldn't be good.
And one day we will see MSL at a major again. One day.
Yeah.
It will likely be with Copenhagen Flames. I see it now. But
Coaching espionage at the Copenhagen major.
I have no idea who that is. I'm going
It's
to pretend
Lucky's team. They're 16th in the world on Val's ranking, mate.
Fuck
16th.
off.
16th. No, they are. Promise. 16th.
How did they do
Lucky.
that?
It's Lucky and a few of his mates. They probably won like one online cup or something.
Oh, it's not real, is it? It's just not real. Can't wait until tournaments are decided by shite like this. But yeah, so
16th, mate. 16th.
let's talk about cadiaN heroball then, because cadiaN heroball definitely exists, and I've seen it win rounds. I've seen it lose games in major semi-finals.
Yeah, we got all that.
How much of a limiting factor do you think cadiaN heroball is? And this is a pure eye test thing.
It is such an eye test thing, which makes it hard, but it's the thing of, I really strongly believe that it's not something he does in normal games. I think he does it when he feels like his team needs a lift, or when he feels that his stars aren't performing and things like that. I think he's doing it when he can't rely on the system. And actually, I think that's kind of more of a problem, because it's your IGL saying, fucking hell, this is falling apart, I'm going to do something stupid. And that is almost just as disheartening as if it was your IGL saying, I'm the fucking main character, I'm going to do this. Like, I don't think it is the main character thing. I think it's desperate time, desperate measures type thing. And either way, it's not good. It's not good. His individual form is actually kind of bad, like recently as well, like really bad. I know he was ill at Pro League, but I'm not really talking about Pro League. I mean generally, like a lot of these top teams, the cadiaN was kind of left the argument on hold that you need a good AWPer to be like a great AWPer to be a great team. I think we always get to this point of AWPing IGLs, and James the only one who kind of doesn't bother with this argument, but you do kind of get to that point. Like the cadiaN Fallen thing, they're both like moments players. They have big rounds. They have really big rounds, but is it worth it to have them on the AWPer game? Like, I don't know. And I think again, he benefits from the same thing that stavn and jabbi benefit from, and that there's no one better than him. Like, I'm not convinced a core would put up that much better numbers than cadiaN in a heroic system that is so based on trading and and things like that. I don't think he's that much better, mate.
There is someone better.
We're not doing device. We're not doing that. Unless heroic go bust tomorrow.
But for the sake of it, let's not pretend that there is no one better than him.
No one available, obviously.
Okay, fine.
But yeah, what we're talking about is the only way that the Danish scene gets an on one team is if heroic go bust or Astralis go bust, and you make a super team out of Blame F device and some heroic players. That's what we're talking about, and that's not going to happen. Like, cadiaN is not going to give up the AWP to fucking 8-core or Nika does, or like Lucky. Like, this is not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And don't tell me you've heard that's happening, because I just refuse to believe that's happening. Unless he's getting cut because they've lost faith completely.
No,
like, I don't want him to do that. So what are you doing those eyes for? What are you about to say?
Don't worry about it. We'll talk about it later.
Don't tell me that's happening. I'm fuming. If that's happening, I'm fuming.
It's not. As far as I know, it's not happening.
Okay, good.
We'll talk about it later. Don't worry about it.
Spoilers. But yeah, what I'm saying is, I think cadiaN needs to steady the ship a little bit. He needs to have faith in the ideals behind the team that kind of got him here in the first place. The heroball definitely could calm down a little bit, but I see why it's kind of approaching the point where people are starting to blame him now, when before they never did. But like, there's much to be blamed for the heroball moments. Like, he is one of the ones who's better on stage. Like, he's kind of up there with jabbi. Like, eye test wise, at least he doesn't really choke as much. Like, he's doing that in the moments because he's probably like, he's just like, fuck it, like, I need to help the team out. And he should probably, like, what do you think on the angle of, like, if a team's choking, it's nearly always the IGL's fault? Because you see that a lot. And is that true of him? Like, Carrigan's basically said it was low-key his fault for FaZe and stuff like that, and TeSeS and things like that.
I think that's bullshit. I think in the case of Carrigan and FaZe, it's absolutely true. I think with heroic, no. I think stavn does shit far too frequently for astound shit far too frequently for it to just consistently be blamed on the IGL. And I mean, like, okay, let's look at it this perspective, right? It's far lower down, but we've played games. Like, I've called shit, you've called shit. We've both had our little fun as an IGL. How many times have we lost games because A, people don't listen to calls properly, or B, people just aren't hitting their fucking shots? Like, we've had so many games where one of us has made the right call consistently. We go out on the site and we're just not shooting people that we normally shoot. Like, this isn't... It's not something like you can always blame it on the IGL. That's why IGLs always get fucking scapegoated. Like, it's not... I'm going to get to a point about what I think cadiaN at this point might need to be blamed for. But I don't think it's fair if a team's consistently choking. Yeah, okay, maybe recently, because we said, right, the system doesn't look like it's working as much. Heroic aren't playing like Heroic. Heroic don't look like Heroic. Blame cadiaN for that. I don't give a fuck. But Cato, Rio, Paris, no. Bullshit. That's people on the team not hitting their shots. But what I do want to blame cadiaN for, or not blame him for, but what I think is potentially a problem with cadiaN that might have become an issue. And I'm going to do your head in, right? Because I'm going to compare it to WWE. And you're not going to enjoy this. You're not going to enjoy this. But here we go, right? So in WWE, Cody Rhodes came back after years, and his dad's one of the most iconic wrestlers of all time, but he never won the WWE Championship. So Cody's entire narrative is this idea of finishing the story. And cadiaN has built his own narrative as, Cologne 2015 or whatever it was, he was an analyst, and then he went over to America, and then he made his way back to a major, and then he made his way back to the Danish scene. It didn't go well, and then he was on Heroic, and now they've made a major final and all this bullshit, right? And the difference is, with Cody Rhodes, it's fucking fiction. It's fiction. All he has to do is turn up, be a main event superstar, and eventually, because that's the narrative, they will put the belt on him. Counter-Strike ain't fucking fiction. But because all there is this build-up of Heroic is there for cadiaN to finish his story. Heroic is there because one day cadiaN's going to win Cologne, he's going to win Cato, he's going to win a major. All this bullshit. And yes, when some of the team is so young and, however much cadiaN tries to explain it before a match, we'll never be able to understand what it was like for cadiaN. It's probably more of a thing where it actually hinders them than helps them, because they're fighting for something that to 4 out of 5 of them isn't actually fucking real. And I think it puts too much pressure on them.
Think about how much pressure's on cadiaN's back. He's like the AWPer, the captain, the emotional leader. Like, he can't have an off day. You see what happens when cadiaN has an off day, because you see Pro League, like, cadiaN's ill, the emotional leader's gone, and they finished 21st to 28th. Like, this is... I just think it's so... I hate it when IGLs get blamed. Like, I completely agree. I hate it when IGLs get blamed for their team playing like this. And yes, cadiaN, the narrative is all about cadiaN, blah, blah, blah. But, like, I'm not convinced that's a huge factor within the team. I don't think they wake up thinking, oh, fucking hell, I wish there was a headline about me today. Like,
no, I'm not saying it's that. I'm just saying it probably gives them a bit more pressure than they need. Yeah, it's subconscious pressure.
I think there needs to be pressure on them. I think this is a team that has been number one in the world without winning, like, a huge event. Like, this is... Like, you need to just be stronger. You need to just have a winning mentality and not care. Like, cadiaN is an interesting story. We could have talked about cadiaN's interesting story. That shouldn't be the reason you stop winning tournaments. Even if cadiaN believes his own hype or whatever, I don't care. Like, this is...
No, but, this
is not responsible.
Okay, here's the thing, right? People don't talk about Snappy's story, and there isn't that added pressure there because he doesn't talk about his own story. I'm saying it's self-inflicted pressure that isn't needed because he speaks about it himself. And I think if they forgot about all that bullshit, like I spoke to a dude, right? And I can't remember if you were there or not, but do you remember there was that after party at the hotel I was in Paris Saturday? Were you there?
Don't think so.
Like I spoke to him then, right? One of the it was me, him, and Jack, and literally the second thing out of his mouth was just like, "Oh no, but it's fine though because now I know like my story will finish in Copenhagen, and how much better is that?" Like, my brother in Christ, now you're giving yourself 10 months to fuck your head from pressure. Stop doing it. Right, when you like contrast this against Magisk, who has won 4 majors, and when I interviewed him, I asked him about them. I interviewed him in the Champions Media Day, so this was the Wednesday, and I asked him about getting to the final and Zaiwu winning a major in front of the French crowd. He refused to answer. He was like, "No, I'm not doing it. Like, I will only talk to you about my next game. That is my next game. I will never speak past that game."
He's a fucking bowler. Stick Magisk in for Jabbi. Give Magisk star rolls.
Because
Pay him 400 grand.
oh,
It's not going to happen.
now
obviously.
we're talking.
He'd
No,
be
it's not.
psychotic to leave, but
It's
that
not.
was
But now,
fixable. He's that good.
but this is he's what people think dupreeh is. But this is what I mean, right? Is that Snappy doesn't put this pressure on himself. Magisk doesn't put this pressure on himself. cadiaN is putting not only this pressure on himself, and yes, he has pressure that will come from being the leader, being the captain, being the AWPer. Doesn't need to do the extra bullshit, man. I get it. The narrative's cool, and it narrative makes sport better. But he's the one fucking competing in it. Yeah, leave the narrative bullshit to us. Like, just go and win your fucking matches, man. Like,
yeah, I mean, I see what you mean. I think it's definitely a little bit of an element, but but ultimately, I do think it's kind of, we're at the point with the project where it's so hard to reinvent yourselves while you're still the same unit. Like, I think it doesn't have to be a player all the time, but sometimes it's like a system change or like a coaching change and things like that. I'm just not too sure what they do out of this other than have a nice long boot camp, try and like if I was them, I'd be the first grinding CS2 because that home major's coming up, and yes, that's going to put pressure on themselves and they don't like that, but fucking hell, you need to just find something out about CS2 that no one else knows and be able to prevent upsets in the way that Prime Heroic always could, when everyone else is going to be losing to 16-year-old Russians who have like the best CS rating and just get invited to the major because that's how it works or something. Like, Heroic should be aiming to rekindle the system that was so good against underdogs, because I think winning Copenhagen is going to be so much about that. It's going to be so much about surviving for the playoff games. And then the playoff games, you never know. It might be like Paris, but they've learned from Game Legion. Fucking hope they have. But they're up against an underdog again, and they're able to overcome that. Like this is, it just can't keep happening. It's the TSM Astralis thing. It can't keep happening. At some point, I just have to believe the switch can be flipped. But I mean, it's going to be so hard because you look at all the competition around them. They don't, like, the firepower thing is always going to be a limiting factor. There's the Cloud9 team. This G2 will always be a threat, and Nico still wants his major. Like, there's so much firepower in the scene, and ultimately, I don't think a Danish team, Heroic or Astralis, like, they're not going to be able to match that. Like, in the real world where these dream moves aren't happening, like, they're going to have to rely on a system and like belief in each other and that kind of real team spirit that cadiaN wanted to foster in Heroic and did for a long time and probably still does. And I just hope that when they boot camp after Pro League, like, I'm sure they will, because they cancelled theirs or whatever, like, I'm sure that we're going to see a much better Heroic and they'll be back to being consistent. But without that star player, are they going to be better than they were before? Like, probably not. Like,
well, this is the thing that I wanted to say, right? It's like, sure, they can go have the boot camp, and sure, we get into CS2, and if any team's going to figure out some fucking bullshit with CS2, it's going to be Heroic. Yeah, it's going to be Heroic, or it will be Astralis. But let's be real, it's more likely to be Heroic. Except for Ancient, then it will all be Astralis. But, yeah, I just think without the star player, without even half a star player, which is where they're at, if Jabbi keeps playing like this and stavn, has to step foot in an arena, like, I just can't see Heroic ever, like, winning anything of note, because what they're going to, like, look at Vitality's fucking ratings. Like, look at those individual player ratings. Look at G2's individual player ratings. Even look at Astralis, right? When we were sat there in Cologne, and I turned to you and Elliot, and I said, which one of these two teams has the better firepower? Heroic were what? Like second in the world at the time? Astralis were like 8th? Some shit like that? There should be no world where you have to think about it. And I'm pretty sure in the end, you both said Astralis. And if you look at,
they're top heavy, but yeah.
Yeah. But that's the thing, right? If you look at the ratings of the 5 players in the 2 teams, every single Heroic player is above 1 point something or other. And then Astralis is like, Buzz is like 1.02. The other 2 are below 1.0. And then Device and Blame F are 1.2 something each. Like, I think it's 1.25. Like, Heroic cannot be expected to win an event until they have someone who is a superstar, because they will never be able to match a single team with a superstar. And any team with a superstar will have to lose to another team with a superstar for Heroic to do it. And then maybe we have a Heroic Ents final and they have a choke off.
Yeah, but I think, and we kind of drummed this point home enough, I don't want to like keep going at it, but when we talk about the firepower so much, do you not think maybe this is a good time to kind of look back on it and say, well, fucking hell, they overperformed a lot, didn't they? Like, this is, like, actually considering how good they've been for the last 2 years, I think we're always going to look for the extra step that's going to make them winners, because that's how sport works. Like, second doesn't really matter. You're not going to be remembered. Like, they're not going to be remembered as fondly as they should be for how well they define the meta and everything. And I think, honestly, it's a good time to just think about how good they had to be to compete with these super teams that are coming out with like huge budgets, all this firepower. Like,
here's where I'm going to stop you. Right? Because I think you're now taking it in the wrong direction. Yeah, we should be looking at them overperforming. And we shouldn't be looking at them overperforming because they were doing this and they were doing that. Let's look at it in this route. Navi dropped off because of outside factors. FaZe dropped off because of whatever fucking reason. They weren't as good anymore.
VP regens.
G2 were inconsistent for a while, but still have inconsistency problems. Ents dropped off for 6 months. These are all the teams around them at the time, like last year, first half of last year. Ents dropped off because they lost Spinks. Vitality took a while to get going with Spinks. Who else is there? There's like Astralis were nothing.
Oh shit,
They're currently
Cloud9 choking
well.
too, of course.
Cloud9 were choking all the time.
Liquid Fury and
aren't worth
non-factors,
mentioning. Yeah, not worth mentioning. All these teams, I don't think they overperform because of themselves. At this point now, I'm willing to say they overperform because everyone else was just kind of fucking bad. And when you actually look at this Heroic team, now that everyone else is good, what you're going to see is a steady decline until they find themselves as just what, before the IEM 16 playoff shit would have just been that top 8 team that made pretty much every playoffs, but you never thought was going to win an event. That's what I think we're looking at Heroic being now that the top teams are so fucking good. And I think that should be the takeaway. It's actually Heroic with the main benefactors of a very weak scene.
And you've got to look back at it and think, like, the Rio loss to Outsiders should never happen. I know that, but you've seen Outsiders since. Like, this is not a team that should be winning a fucking major. Heroic were the team that should have won that major, and they barely put up a fight in that final. And Game Legion as well. Like, that Mirage game, I remember watching. I was in disbelief for all 24 rounds or whatever it was because they just got battered that hard. Like, Like, I kept thinking, okay, this is going to click now. This is going to click. And I'm just looking at the scoreboard stats. Got 4
Shaking
kills,
in
5
rage.
kills, 6 kills. You were next to me. I was fuming the whole game. I was just like, what is happening? Like, he was just running down the mid at the best team in the world, just killing them all. Like, those losses are going to haunt them for a long, long time. Because I do think you're right. I think there was a bit of a lull on the scene. Everyone was kind of getting used to this, like, how to be a stable super team. Like, that was kind of the lesson that everyone was trying to learn at once. I don't think anyone's really cracked it. Maybe Vitality have. I think Vitality are probably the ones that should crack it first. I think they've got the blueprint there in a way that G2 are always going to be a bit spottier because they rely so much on JKS and Hunter in big games. Like I know Nico had that amazing cologne, but that's so hard to do in his roles, even for someone like him. Like I think Vitality are the ones with the floor, and you kind of look at Heroic and I don't know, because I spoke to Snappy at Cologne, right, and I asked him about where the meta was, because a lot of people are like, oh, it's stagnant, everyone's just waiting for CS2, blah, blah. And he said that people talk a little bit too much about the way Heroic defines CT sides and things, and he thinks that recently, like, basically Chaos Ball on T side has been really, really effective, and he thinks that's why Ents and Vitality have kind of been the two best teams, because they've really perfected, like, Apex has switched to more of his type of calling, which is more Chaos Ball. Snappy's always been Chaos Ball, and it's kind of evolved to a point where actually we're looking at Heroic and maybe it makes too much sense. Maybe it makes the T sides make too much sense, and all the trading and all the pressuring at the right time and things like that. Like maybe there's a little bit of that going on, and you're kind of looking for the X factor, and when Jabbi's not there, he's not there, and yeah. And I mean, I'm always going to try and be positive, because on this podcast it'd be fucking boring if we were both as negative as we are maybe when we're not recording. I have to be positive on this podcast, but it's hard to see a way where they're not going to look back in a few years and think, you know what, maybe Rio and Paris, that was our time, and we didn't take it. And that's really sad to me, because I think this team deserved a good legacy for the way they play Counter-Strike in the most boring era of Counter-Strike. They were the team I looked forward to watching. And that I'll always remember them for that, but I think a lot of people will just remember them as losers.
Well, I agree. And I think that would be a shame, but that is ultimately the nature of competition. And I should end it there, but I want to do a funny thing, because there was a conversation in our Discord the other day about a Danish super team and how you could only have, I believe it was 2 of Blameth, stavn, Device, and cadiaN. So, Harry, for the sake of it, I mean, I'm not limiting you to 2, but that's what someone said in the Discord. For the sake of it, Danish super team, go.
Are we including like the Vitality players and Ents players, and like, or is it literally Heroic, Astralis mashed? Is it a Danish scene super team or a Danish super team? Because I think
give me one of each, just because now I'm intrigued. I was going to say Heroic Astralis, but now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, Heroic Astralis, I think, is the easy one. I think you stick cadiaN on the rifle. He is a bitch on T side and a bitch on CT side. Yeah, he is worse than TeSeS. He doesn't get any of the TeSeS good rolls. He's Taco. You got Blameth baiting him. That's the entry pack. Ooh. Oh, I'll have to think about this. Device is the AWP. Shush is the anchor, other anchor. Shush and cadiaN anchors. Rotate is Blameth, and you're struggling. The fifth name, but honestly, you can stick anyone in the fifth name. You've got Blameth, and you do need the third piece. This is the thing.
Blameth.
Do you have to put stavn in? Do you have to have stavn and Blameth lurking? But then there's so many voices. There's so many voices in that team. I don't think it can work.
I'd go.
So who's the fifth?
I'd go for.
I'm gonna say Altex.
I'd go for Jabbi and hope he cooks again.
Altex fifth. Fuck it.
Okay. Well, I'd go for Jabbi and hope he cooks again. But go on then. Just for the sake of it. Let me guess. Let me guess. Actually, Snappy, Magist, Device.
Yeah, Blame.
Snappy, Blame, Shush.
That's cooking, isn't it?
That is the best roster in the world, right there.
Oh yeah, I mean, Make is back in rotate roles like 2016. You're like, I'm cooking. What do you think about like? Okay, I've just had a round of thought. We're getting long, but config as an X actually.
No,
do you think Katie can make it cook?
No.
Okay, end it now. End it now.
End it there. Right. Yeah. So, fucking hell, Harry.
You got me thinking about config and Magus together again. I'm getting MSL back with those two, man. That's then we're cooking.
Let's not do that. Maybe MSL and config. Let's not ruin Magist time. Okay. Ooh, composure. Right. So, what do you guys think about Heroic? How are they going to be remembered? And, did they actually profit off a scene that was, in retrospect, quite dog shit? Other than that, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We got some Harry bullshit stats content coming soon. I don't even know what it's on. I haven't had the time to watch it yet.
More
But
stavn
other than that,
agendas.
yeah, brilliant. Other than that, we'll be back with some more bullshit too long podcasts soon. I've been your host, Sam Animo Mackenzie. He's been Harry Tries Not to Hate Everything Richards. And we'll catch you in the next one.